Well, hello and welcome to the Graduate Real Estate Association's final Social and Racial Equity in Real Estate speaker series. We are so excited to present you all with our three final speakers who will be discussing the future of social and racial equity in real estate. I'm Mallory Torrey, the co-president, along with Lily Colley of the Graduate Real Estate Association here at CU Boulder. And the intent of this event is to bring to the forefront crucial discussions that have gone ignored for too long in the real estate community. We feel strongly that we have a responsibility as real estate professionals to learn about the impacts our industry has on our community and how we can move forward to create a more just and equitable world.
Thank you for coming to part 3 of the CU GREA series labeled The Future. During this third and final installment of the educational series, we'll plan to talk about what we've learned about the past and present of DEI issues in commercial real estate, and we'll discuss how to leverage this collective knowledge to improve the future. Our respected speakers will talk about how do social justice and DEI issues in today's world manifest themselves and evolve to change. Where do we want to end up? What are the avenues and opportunities presented to commercial real estate professionals and firms? And how do DEI and social justice issues manifest themselves differently from an institutional versus a more local perspective? We'll analyze these topics through various perspectives in order to present a holistic view of the nuances and complexities presented to commercial real estate professionals today as they move into the future. We'll explore how industry professionals can implement and learn from best practices that will help to impact positive change.
Next slide, Preston. And we would like to thank our GREA Executive Board and our sponsors for promoting all three of these events. I especially want to thank our graduating executive members, Meg Grendering, Preston Garland, Christina Tonti, Joe Plastino, and Chris Misroon. Thank you guys so much for all of your help in making the GREA a reality this year. We'd also like to thank ULI Colorado and especially Michael Lachese and Sarah Franklin for helping to promote the event through ULI Colorado.
In addition, we're honored to have the support of the NIOP Colorado chapter, specifically Jaima File, Tim Schittling, and Larry Lance. Thank you. We'd also like to introduce to you next year's head of the Graduate Real Estate Center, Amber Hughes. So once again, thank you to the support of the CU Real Estate Board and to the Leeds community. If you have any questions as we go through this presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat. We put together this event in the spirit of fostering collaboration, education, and creating an environment for an informed and respectful dialogue. Thank you all for your commitment to expanding your perspectives.
And now I am honored to present our speakers. First, we have Haroon Cowens, the Chief Real Estate Officer for the Fly Fisher Group and Managing Director of 5 Points Development Corporation. Haroon has extensive experience in community engagement, development, placemaking in urban environments, and adaptive reuse. He is an active member of the Denver community, serving on multiple community boards, and has combined 20+ years of experience in the real estate, investment, and financing industry. Then we have Nick Thigpen, the Vice President of Portfolio Management at Black Creek Group. He is a graduate of the Real Estate MBA program here at Leeds, go Buffs. And in his role at Black Creek, he oversees execution of business strategy, investor relations, and overall portfolio management for the Black Creek Industrial Fund, which is an open-ended, institutionally capitalized investment platform sponsored by Black Creek Group. And finally, we have Antoine Bryant, who joins us from Houston, Texas, and is a project manager and director of business development of Moody Nolan, a nationally recognized architecture firm and the largest design firm under African-American leadership. Antoine is here representing the National Organization of Minority Architects and is a thought leader and community engagement expert with 25 years of experience in design, development, engagement, and empowerment of underserved communities across the United States. So with that, I'd like to pass it off to our first speaker, Haroon Cowens. Thank you so much for being here, Haroon.
Yeah, well, good afternoon. It is a pleasure just to be here. specifically to join you all on an important topic that I think is very engaging and important, especially today. Just a little bit of background about me and the work that we do here in a very important neighborhood of Denver is we are a group called 5 Points Development Corporation that is a portfolio company of the Fly Fisher Group, very much invested in Denver's only cultural historic neighborhood, which is 5 Points. We are, of course, 5 Points is known for its heritage, its history, between the blocks, specifically the blocks of 20th all the way to 30th and Walton. It was known for the jazz and historic legends that played and stayed here, but it was also known for its entrepreneurship. I mean, where folks did not have the opportunity to have services elsewhere, they were in 5 Points, especially community of color, African Americans specifically. And so today, you can go to the next slide. Today we are invested into this Harlem of the West. Many of the jazz greats played and stayed here in 5 Points because of its cultural heritage. Everything between Denver and between St. Louis and Denver was a stop. And so all the jazz greats, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, and many of the others would play and stay here. It is important that we recognize not the musical heritage, but why did the individuals come and play and stay here in 5 Points was because of the entrepreneurship of others that were the backbone of 5 Points, such as Benny Hooper, Mr. Charles Cousins, and many others of the like were invested in this neighborhood. And so over the last several years, I've been involved in this neighborhood. I grew up just 5 minutes outside of 5 Points specifically. We have been deploying capital from an investment standpoint, but I oversee the development, property management, asset management, and as well as mostly the community engagement and coordination of our curation. And so we are happy that we're able to not only dig deep in the rich cultural heritage as a history, because we're not into just creating museums. We're also looking to create spaces and places where people can taste and enjoy and experience 5 Points in its present, and as well as look forward to a brighter future. And so much of my work has been over the last specifically 17 years has been in this community directly. And from a real estate standpoint, the reason why I chose to go the path of real estate is someone asked me the question a couple of years ago, and my answer is everything is in real estate. We play, we live, we stay, we enjoy, we entertain, all in real estate. And so if you want to affect an environment, I thought real estate was the best place and the best way to do that. And so with that, the idea is the brick and mortar is the backdrop to really the community, what the community brings to the brick and mortar. And so development in real estate is very important as a core tool to engagement, to all the cultural heritage, the art, the music, and as well as all the other business activities in this neighborhood. And so I'm very happy that we're able to do that, specifically in an area that in the 90s had some 80s, late 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s had disrepair. It was more notably known as I was growing up were a place not to go because of the violence and some of the disrepair that happened. And now we are recapturing that history, that it is a place to go, not only for the history, but also what we look at it presently. So happy to join, and thank you. And just to end on this piece, one of our current projects is the Rossonian Hotel. I'm always happy to talk about it just because of its is the crown jewel of the neighborhood. Specifically because, I don't know if many of you have seen the film Green Book. This was one of the places that people would only be able to stay. Some of the jazz greats that were able to come and play when they were leaving St. Louis and coming to Denver, the Rossonian was a place that they could only stay. One of the only places they could only stay. As they would perform in downtown Denver, they would come to the Rossonian Hotel to stay. And then also in the after hours, play and really get together with each other. As I said, the Billie Holidays, Cab Callaways, and many of the others would come and stay at the Rossonian. And so one of our most notable projects that is currently we're under development, we are kicking off our development on this project, is to bring it back, not only to bring it back as a reuse project, but bring it back as the hotel, bring it back with music, and bring it back with activity that is akin to its cultural and his historical heritage. And so we are very happy that this project is coming into fruition. I would call it one of the more famous empty buildings. It's been empty for many years, but we are happy that we're bringing it back to activity and expanding upon the rich heritage that is at the Rossonian Hotel. And last but not least, what is under delivery this coming quarter, at the end of this quarter, we are delivering a building which is really near and dear to my heart, in partnership with our partners, Palisade Partners, on both projects. But this specifically is called the Hooper. It is named after Benny Hooper, who was an entrepreneur who brought music to 5 Points specifically because of his joy of the music, but also the neighborhood. And Benny Hooper was a notable figure in 5 Points. And because his family's so small, and I have relations through my wife, that is her great grand uncle, we wanted to name the building after him because of who he was in the community as philanthropy, and as well as his engagement to the community. We wanted to name the building after him. And this is one of the mixed use projects we're most proud of. It's a new building, but it has an old soul because of the name and who it's named after. And so the Hooper will be delivered at the end of this quarter. Matter of fact, it will be, or the beginning of next. So we're very happy about that, on the same block adjacent to the Rossonian Hotel. Thank you again.
Thank you, Haroon. So now we're going to move to our second speaker, who is Mr. Antoine Bryant.
Well, thank you, Mallory, and Haroon. You got me wanting to invest some money in some property in 5 Corners now. I think I need to get over there. So just save me one lot. Just save me one lot. I got a couple of dollars I like to put over there if you don't mind, sir. Next slide. We're going to talk a little bit and go back in history a bit here. As Mallory and the team discussed, my name is Antoine Bryant. I serve with the National Organization of Minority Architects, an architect and planner here in Houston, and a native of New York. Don't hold it against me, but I'm a Brooklyn guy, so there we go. This is a quote here from Gary Liu, who said, this is your world, shape it or someone else will. And it's something that we've been discussing a lot in our firm and also in our organization, and echoes much of what I heard Haroon discussing about his interest in real estate. As designers and as urban planners, we intimately appreciate that the relationship our work has on the built environment and on building communities. But one of the things that we want to discuss right now is how our communities even came to be. Next slide. This is not a picture of America. This is a picture of Brooklyn. This is actually a picture of our firm. Our firm, Moody Nolan Architects, was established nearly 40 years ago by Kurt Moody. He is actually right near the center. But we use this to reflect who we are as a firm and who we are as an entity. We are the largest architecture firm in the country under African-American leadership. So we are very excited about that. And then additionally, we just received the AIA Firm of the Year Award just this past December. So we're excited that the efforts and leadership of Kurt and Jonathan Moody have been recognized by our peers, but also shows how the strength that diversity and inclusion can have when we are building our communities as well as involving our communities in their own establishment. Next slide. One of the things that we've had, we've all as a nation have dealt with a lot of challenges and a lot of realities we've had to face in the last year or so. And one of the realities that exists in design is some of the disparities that are present, not only in the community, but also in our discipline. And one of the things we wanted to do as a firm was to talk about it, right? And I've joked with numerous friends of mine, the premise of diversity and inclusion has become, hot, quite frankly. I've got a whole bunch of colleagues that are being hired as diversity consultants and all those kinds of things. Well, we wanted to take an extra step, given the makeup, given the, what our firm looks like. We said, we need to talk about some of these things on a continual basis, as well as to define and level set where we are in this country and how this country came to be. And so there's a real opportunity for us to have a greater foundation, and then be able to use that as a springboard to define what our nation and what our firm can be. So we designed something called Walk In and Talk. And these are a couple of things we talked about, much of which you guys are probably covering, but then we wanted to draw the relationship to the built environment and what we can do as architects and planners, right? So racial covenants, these are real things, right? There was a time where, there was put into deeds that says, we don't want these kinds of people to live here. And ironically enough, they still exist. This isn't something that, came in the 20s and went away in the 40s, right? There are communities all across the country, including Houston, Texas, and I'm sure probably in Denver, that still have racial covenants baked into some of the deed restrictions of real estate transactions. Next slide. Again, there's redlining, okay? I know none of the good people at the Leeds School of Business would ever participate in this. However, it is a real thing, right? The practice of a lender to refuse to lend in a specific area, usually by defining by their background or racial or ethnic heritage. And then the lenders wouldn't consider whether the application could be a good candidate. You just couldn't get a loan, period, right? You could be a nice family with a real job and all of the other merits, but it fully defined where people could and could not live. And it's the primary reason why many of the neighborhoods we see across this country look the way they do, because quite frankly, households were directed and prohibited from living in certain parts of town. And this is something that wasn't a southern thing or an eastern thing. It was literally across the country, in large cities and in small towns. Next slide. Blockbusting. You got the good people that Leeds Business School would never do this either, but illegal business practice where unscrupulous real estate agents would tell white owners to sell your home because other people are moving in, right? And the other people often were people of a different background, of a different kind of ethnic background, and then it would change literally and figuratively the color of these neighborhoods. So all three of these initiatives help to shape the quite frankly, the physical landscape that we all live in today. Next. So we walked a little bit into what redlining was and how it came to be. The intent was to slow down, originally with the New Deal, something called the Homeowners Loan Corporation was established because, back in the 30s, people were defaulting left and right. People couldn't get a damn loan and they were defaulting on the loans they had. So they created this thing called the Homeowners Loan Corporation, to prop everybody up. Here, you get a 30-year mortgage, there'll be low interest, everybody gets a house again and a chicken in a pot and, Merry Christmas. But they also use the redlining maps in conjunction with the Homeowners Loan Corporation. So, Mr. Johnson and Miss Jackson can get a home loan, but, Mr. Jenkins couldn't get one, right? And so it definitively said you can get one, but only here, but you couldn't get it in, grade A and grade B. And it fully defined where people lived. Now, what are the ramifications of this? Next slide. What had happened was these policies and practices led to segregation. You guys have probably covered de jure and de facto segregation across countries, the racially restrictive deed covenants that still exist, and which essentially led to agendas of racial and immigrant exclusion. And then trying to turn around, where people live and how people live, it's been a very slow process. Right. And so one of the things we're looking at is how can we change that, and how as architects and designers, we can play a more integral role in the definition of communities. Next slide. One of the things we looked at is that this is still happening, right? This map right here is a graphic of Chicago from 2016, right? This wasn't, in the 50s or 60s. This was 5 years ago. And 68% of the loan dollars for housing purchases in Chicago were in majority white neighborhoods, and less than 9% majority Black, and less than 9% in majority Latino or Latinx neighborhoods, right? So, you know, it's you guys can do the math. You guys are getting MBAs, you're smarter than me, but the short version is that for every dollar bank loaned in Chicago's white neighborhoods, they put 12 cents in the city's Black neighborhoods, right? So, you know, the fiscal realities of that are tremendous. You have a marginalization of household income in a city, but also, next slide, as we all know, you know, what housing and property tax revenue leads to the public infrastructure for public schools, right? So the non-white school districts get $23 billion, yes, that is with a B, less than white districts, despite serving the same number of students, right? So, you know, you now have residents that are kind of cornered in certain parts of that municipality, and the schools that they're serving those kids have less resources, right? Then some other things. Next slide. Then there's even things that we don't even think about, right? So the maps show tree canopy, right? You know, what kind of ways what kind of trees and vegetation exist in these neighborhoods? What does that mean? That means in certain redlined areas, which are usually populated by Black and brown people, they literally have hotter temperatures, right? It's like, so you got a worse place to live and it's hot. It's ridiculous, right? And so, you know, there's all kinds of tendrils that are existing purely by legislation that happened 70 and 80 years ago to define where people live, which then defines what kind of schools they go to, which then defines literally, you know, how much tree cover they have, which then defines as an environmental graphic of how hot it is in that area. Next slide. So one of the things we started doing was putting together a reading list and a video list to kind of talk about that. You guys have probably heard about The Color of Law. Richard Rothstein actually wrote this book maybe 4 years ago. It wasn't even like it was last summer, but he's been on the lecture circuit everywhere, right? Much of what we discussed here, as well as some other things that actually some of the things that Haroon touched on are covered in his book. My degree was in urban planning. We talk about the history of cities as part of our curricula. And it really gives you an eye-opening opportunity to understand how cities are formed, and then to give you some ideas of how to move forward. I want to spend about 30 seconds talking about that. The National Organization of Minority Architects, we partner with organizations all the time. One of the ones that we're looking at, we have establishing a relationship with USGBC, the Green Building Council, but also we're in the very beginning stages of one with ILFI, it's the International Living Future Institute. And what they intensely look at is not only how buildings and communities are building from a sustainability standpoint, but like many organizations, we're looking at what we call JEDI, right? So it's not just diversity and inclusion, but also justice and equity, which will lead to diversity and inclusion. And so I want to spend some time talking with that after Nick has an opportunity to speak, but we really want to ensure that justice and equity are part of that diversity and inclusion discussion. All right, thanks guys.
Great, thank you so much, Antoine. That was really informative. So now we're gonna move on to Nick Thigpen from Black Creek Group. Take it away, Nick.
Great, thanks Mallory, thanks Lily, and everyone else. Great to put this series together, and I watched the first 2 parts, and they were exceptionally well done, good panelists and great conversation. So happy to be a part here. And as you mentioned earlier, did graduate from the MBA program in 2017. So wasn't too long ago that I was in your shoes and some others. And I know you'll have the NAIOP competition coming up soon. So good luck to everybody who's working through their developments there. Hopefully maybe I'll get some tidbits from this series to incorporate. So, I work at Black Creek Group. We're Denver based, and let's go to the next slide here. I just want to tell you a little bit about the firm and where I'm coming from, so you know what the perspective is. So we're Denver based, but we operate nationally. This map gives you a sense of where our properties are across the U.S. The little green stars show our offices. So we have offices in New Jersey, LA, Dallas, Chicago, and Atlanta. And those are strategically placed there because we're primarily an industrial operator. So we own and operate industrial warehouses across the U.S. But again, very happy to be headquartered in Denver. And it's pretty neat that we can be based here, but have this national reach. We'll go to the next slide. So a lot of our capital at Black Creek comes from institutional investors, and I wanted to use this time to talk a little bit about the trends that we have experienced as managers of institutional capital as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as environmental, social, and governance issues, which is sort of, I guess you would say, like the predecessor for the conversations that are happening today around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have had numerous investors over the last, call it 4 to 5 years, who have approached us to say, we want you to help us advance our environmental, social, and governance initiatives. And we, as stewards of their capital and good partners, want to take them up on that and help. And in turn, that improves our platform and helps us attract more capital, helps us attract more talent, and increases just the viability and resilience of our business. So Christy Hill, I think, was on your second part of this series with Prudential. So for anyone who was on that, I'll echo some of her sentiment. She mentioned one line that capital leads the way, which, whether that's entirely true or not, it absolutely applies in this instance, and I'm very happy to say that our capital partners are pushing these initiatives across managers. So this slide here is GREA, but is how you pronounce it, just GREA, but it's the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark. And this was a group of LPs and GPs got together and said, we need to standardize some sort of reporting around diversity and inclusion, as well as environmental and governance issues. So they developed a survey that is completed annually by both investors as well as managers like us. And the intent is to level set managers across the world, and capital partners can then look at where do you fit in the scale, right? I won't say it's always a work in progress, right? It's advanced a lot in the 12 or so years they've been doing it, but they're picking up a lot of steam. I think they're up to 900 submissions or something like that globally at this point. And from the institutional investor perspective, I think it's really helpful to have both this standardization as well as just it leads to consistency for their evaluation. So we have a number of our partners who require it at this point, so they actually won't give us capital as managers unless we submit to this benchmark. And they're starting to incorporate it into their annual hold-sell analysis with managers, which, again, it's really lighting the fire under managers to up their game and be more active participants in what's happening in the world. So happy to answer any questions around GREA. We submitted last year for the first time on the fund that I helped to manage, and it was a really interesting process. We learned a lot along the way, and I'll tell you a little bit about some of the things we've done since. We go to the next slide here. So at the asset level, we are hyper-focused as fiduciaries on what produces a financial return, right? That's always at the forefront of our thinking. We look for ESG initiatives that we can really put a finger on and say this increases NOI or increases liquidity, right? So 2 examples I'm giving here. One is rooftop solar, which can be done from leasing your rooftop to a developer who will put on the infrastructure, most likely sell that income stream to a long-term investor, but as a building owner, we get revenue on the rent of that rooftop solar lease. Our tenants may benefit from a lower cost of energy if they're consuming the energy, or it gets sold back into the grid and offsets some more carbon intensive energy production. So it's a win-win-win across the board. Our tenants benefit, our investors benefit, the greater community benefits. So that's something that we're actively pursuing. The building and the site plan here is a project that we are delivering in Southern California with a rooftop solar system in place, and we're happy to continue to scale this initiative. The other, following that, Antoine had mentioned LEED, USGBC, BREEAM is another common certification. These certifications you obtain by, I'm sure everyone's aware of LEED in particular, but you obtain by improving the efficiency of a building, in particular design aspects. What we've seen is that having a LEED symbol on an industrial warehouse doesn't necessarily increase your NOI, right? Our tenants aren't pushing for it yet. I think they will in the near future. But because institutional investors are demanding that we, have the most efficient buildings to combat any obsolescence risk or anything like that, these certifications, we think, improve the liquidity of our buildings, right? So we'll pursue certifications in many instances and take comfort in the fact that if we underwrite a 10-year hold and 10 years from now, we think that building will achieve a higher resale value because it has these design characteristics, which have been stamped by someone like USGBC, a third-party group. So again, two examples of ways where we've been able to increase our financial return for our investors and improve.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I think I lost you there.
There you go. We can hear you now. Good comeback.
How about now? Okay. Sorry, everybody. Let's go to the next slide. Great. This is another case study I just wanted to talk about briefly. This is a site that we acquired in New Jersey. And this used to be a pipe manufacturing facility. You can see some of the remnants of the foundation under the building 1 area, and pretty heavily environmentally contaminated. There were volatile organic compounds throughout the site under building 1. Building 2, you can see that sort of oblong shape on the south side. That's a landfill. So it was a lot of leftover materials from the pipe manufacturing process that they deposited on the south side of the site. And then there's a lot of, it was a sand-like material that was under kind of the number 2 of building 2. So it's wooded, but the earth under there was, it was deed restricted against many types of development, including residential. So this manufacturing facility stopped operation, call it 20 years ago, and the land just sat fallow. The neighborhood in the area, you can see some of the residential to the north and to the east. A lot of those residents used to work in this manufacturing facility, so it was certainly a detriment to the area when the business closed. And the median household income in this area is a little lower than some of the surrounding areas, and that can be attributed in part to the closure of this business. So as industrial developers, I don't think we're necessarily seen as the stalwarts of environmental, social, and governance initiatives and the like, but I just wanted to show this one as an example. We did purchase this land. We went through a remediation process under the building 1 area and got it to the point where we were able to safely construct an industrial warehouse, cap the land underneath it, and it was acceptable to have people work in the warehouse without any kind of health risk or anything like that. For building 2, we built a building just to the north side of the landfill. And then we're actually, we've submitted the landfill as well as both rooftops for the buildings to New Jersey's program for community solar. So looking for ways to bring this previously fallow land back into use. There's a level of job creation with the warehouses. There's lower carbon intensity with the solar. And again, it's just a way to bring land that really wasn't able to be used in other ways back into production. So we're happy with that. The leasing has gone phenomenally well. So again, a win for our investors and for some of the local members as well. I'll mention the green areas, the sort of green highlights. The odd shaped one in the north, as well as the triangle one in the north, we actually deeded that back to the city. And there's a baseball field on the odd shaped one and a basketball court on the triangle one. So that was a way that when we were going through the entitlements process, we could proceed with the industrial development and also make sure that there was a benefit to the local community members as well. Go to the next slide. So the last two slides were really about the environmental aspect. The more social equity side, from Black Creek's perspective, we started by looking at gender composition in the company. So what you're seeing here are three different groups broken up by gender at Black Creek. On the far right is our leadership. The middle is the vast majority of the team. And then on the far left are really like the new entrants to our company, right? This is our 2020 intern class who's going to come on full time here when they graduate in June. So what we saw in the trend that we didn't really like is that our leadership is primarily male dominated. What we have started to do in response to really seeing that is to focus our efforts on the next generation of real estate investment professionals. So we see this chart as moving from left to right. And as time goes on and as our generation takes over this business and industry, I fully expect that because of the things we're doing today, that trend that you're seeing on the far right will go away, which I think would be a great thing. If you move to the next slide here. So these are some programs that we participate in, that other institutional investors participate in, or managers as well, to help facilitate that trend from the previous slide. On the right-hand side, these are 5 groups that we're active with to help source our interns. Next one up is based in Baltimore. We had an intern out of Next One Up last year. Prep for Prep is New York City. SEO is actually organized by GREA, which is institutional investor trade group. And so our CEO, Raj Danda, came through SEO many years ago. So it's great that he came through this program and now leads our company. A good way for us to be involved. WNBC on the left side. So this is the Women's Network at Black Creek, which was founded in 2015 as a way to promote female progress at Black Creek. And there's a mentorship program. There are every other month we do a lunch and learn that they host. There's a number of networking events and then community service events as well. But it's been super successful at Black Creek. Virtually every female in our company, which is 46% right now, is a member of WNBC. And we're really proud to have the support of Raj and the 2 partners of the firm to bring this program to fruition. So I'll stop there, but again, just appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of the things that we're seeing in the institutional space and how a manager like us is reacting.
Thank you so much for all of those diverse perspectives. We're really grateful for your contributions. And I know Mallory and I have some questions for all three of you. And please, anyone in the audience, feel free to add them to the chat. But I thought I would start with Antoine. Thank you for discussing the inequities that still exist in our neighborhoods, but also for addressing that, you know, DEI and social equity as sort of a corporate ESG initiative have become a bit of a hot topic, if you will. You know, to steal a term from the environmental sphere, how do you kind of avoid proverbially greenwashing some of these initiatives in big companies? Is standard reporting needed? You know, I know Nick just talked about a few other initiatives that the industry itself is taking, but, you know, is third-party authenticity needed? The SEC recently came out saying that they've put together a task force to help work on the reporting from this issue. So love maybe Antoine to jump in, and then Nick, if you could, thanks for turning the conversation also to equity on the gender role and the gender side. So maybe you can jump in after that on some progress of these efforts so far as well. I know you just touched on that at the end, but.
Well, thank you, Lily. I appreciate that. The short answer is yes, right, to all of that. You know, we need kind of third-party verification. We need inclusion on a number of our firms in the industry. I chuckle slightly, and this isn't aspersion at you at all. I cringe sometimes at the phrase task force. I was taught that task force is where all good ideas go to die, right? So, you know, something comes up with a problem, let's create a task force, right? And then, you know, you have a task force and then you have a report and then nothing happens, right? So, you know, I'm a little nervous about task force. One things we try to do is encourage partners to, you know, quote unquote, do better, right? Nationalization of Minority Architects, we engage with AIA, which American Institute of Architects, they have a committee called the Large Firm Roundtable. Large Firm Roundtable represents the 50 largest architecture firms in the country. And those firms, just those firms themselves, they total, I think it's between 88 and 90% of architectural billings in the United States, right? So literally 50 firms control all the design fees, which has ramifications in a variety of ways. So one of the things that we have encouraged them to do, and many of them have signed on to do, is a number of things. It addresses kind of ethnic challenges as well as gender challenges. They've signed on to a minimum of 10% of their interns to be people of color or women, right? And the reason why it sounds like, oh, 10% is nothing. Well, the fact of the matter is that in this country, when I entered architecture school in 1991, the number of licensed African-American architects was 1.9% of the industry. Now, you know, 30 years later, it's 2.1. Right, so it went from 1.9% to 2.1%. You know, there are various reasons why, but you know, we want to push to get more representation. And there's a number of reasons here. The disparity among the genders is even more marked than what Nick had spoken about in real estate when you get to architecture. And some of it comes down to what they call like the mommy trap and family trap. You know, architecture has a pretty intensive licensing procedure. And so, you know, many women that are focused on that, and they're like, okay, when do we start a family? It's a real thing in architecture. And so we've got a number of firms to sign on to address that very real inequity. And then lastly, we really encourage not only reporting, but transparency. One of the biggest challenges, if you are a young professional, you know, what is the promotion track? What is the opportunities that exist for you to grow? And it's been a little secret, like behind the screen of, you know, how a Mallory or a Lily could become a principal at a design firm. You don't really quite know. And so one of the things that we have gotten many firms to do is be much more transparent. And as anyone here can appreciate, when an entity is encouraged to be transparent, it forces them to really realize either A, our protocols are crummy and you know, exclusionary, or B, we don't have any protocols at all and we've just been doing the handshake and wink for the longest amount of time. And so now that transparency has encouraged firms as well as the industry to be really honest about where the gaps are and try to take some initiative to change it.
I would echo the transparency comment. I think that I mean the gender slide that I had put up I'm sad to say we weren't tracking that prior to 2 years ago, and it's clear as day where the shortfalls are. And I intentionally didn't put our ethnicity chart up because it's not something I'm particularly proud of, but being able to see those now, that's the first step for us to be able to make a change. And not only for us internally to see it, but for me to put it on a slide for everyone here to see, for us to report that to our partners. It's the accountability is really increasing, and that's a critical thing to see change and not just have the task force effect that Antoine talked about.
I appreciate it. And I'm sure maybe you saw Volvo, I think in the last week, passed 24 weeks paid leave for both fathers and mothers. And part of the reason for that is to avoid that mother trap, if you will, and to stop having a stigma around women needing to take more time off for parental leave because it's the right thing to do. So, these conversations, while, can't change overnight, as we've discussed with pipelines, et cetera, are incredibly valuable. So thanks, Mallory, if you have a question now.
Yeah, I wanted to bring Haroon into the conversation a bit. I have kind of a big, all-encompassing question for you. Basically, could you walk us through the story of how the redevelopment of the Rossonian came to be? Specifically talking about the timeline and the investments and community engagement that you may have brought with this. And how do you define a successful future for 5 Points?
Sure. I'll start with just that last piece, and then I'll get into the project of the Rossonian. I think the definition of success for 5 Points, at least from our view, and my even personal view, is that 5 Points isn't just the museum, if you will. This used to be an African-American neighborhood. This used to be the people that did some great things. I think it would be a failure if you have shiny new buildings and places that are vibrant, but it doesn't have the cultural context. And that cultural context, like I said, isn't just static, it should be alive. And so for us it should be vibrant even now. And if it was a place of entrepreneurship in the past, it should be a place of entrepreneurship, and Black and brown communities and all communities can come and see that, but it's rooted in the legacy of it. And so I think that all the things that are active should be rooted in that same legacy, that it's not just a hit, like the Rossonian. So the Rossonian specifically, of course, is a building that is steeped in history, but today is not active. And so it's a little bit analogous to the whole community, if you will. When you come down to 5 Points, you hear about how vibrant it was, how many things that were down, and how engaging it was. And so for us, is we really are looking to curate spaces in which people still feel a part of it, and that the African-American community and all communities, but especially the African-American community, can feel that this is still the community that it historically was, but we can engage with it today and still base our creativity, our energy off of the legacy. And so that they could be benefactors of that legacy. And so I think that, for us, the success of 5 Points would be that, and that when folks do come to Denver, that they come to Denver and they get to experience and see that it's not only a historical thing, it is a present thing, and that folks in the future can be able to still engage and be able to see that presently. Because it's one thing when you build a building and you say it has the name of Benny Hooper or it's the Rossonian, but no one engages and the spaces don't feel and have that same vibe. And so we're really intent in how we develop to make sure that spaces also you also see Black and brown spaces and faces in these spaces, because what had happened, of course, over the course of the last at least 25 years is the businesses started to transition out and away from 5 Points. And so for us is, instead of us only building new stuff, we've done some reuse so we can attract new businesses back to 5 Points. And so I'm grateful to say that we have now over 35 plus minority and women-owned businesses in 5 Points, and 10 new businesses that are ran by African Americans in 5 Points, and that's huge. That's tremendous. And so really we want to build on that legacy and that success. And specifically with the Rossonian, I mean, I got engaged in the Rossonian Hotel, project, and it's almost a shame to say, but 12 years ago, it's been a passion project. And so, there's been a lot of stops and starts. There's been a lot of, energy behind it. And so, but the reason I've been involved in it and we've got involved in it, because we know it means more than the brick and mortar. It means to the community. If this is a microcosm of what the larger community could really be able to feel and experience. And so, it's been specifically, now as the Fly Fisher Group, we've been involved in the last 3 years. And so, we're looking to not only bring the building back in a reuse capacity, that it's active, but we're wanting to make sure that it retains its historical context. So we want to make sure it's a hotel. We want to make sure that music's a part of it, and that it also, that we're not only talking about, well, it used to be, we're talking about what it is today. And we want to do it in a way that is special, because it has a lot of potential and people see, have a lot of anticipation. And the reason it's taken so long is, it was a hotel that was built for 1912. That's a lot, as we, as designers and architects, there's a totally difference in 2020 and 2021. And so we're looking to bring that usage back, but we have to make sure that also makes business sense and that it continues to not only be open for the next 5 years, but the next 50 and 100 years. And so we're really happy about that, because I think, and to talk about just the music portion, we want to bring the same element. If it was the legends of that time, we want to bring legendary acts and artists back to the Rossonian now, because we think that's special. And so that people can say, yeah, I seen, that Ellis Fitzgerald used to play here, but who's the Ella Fitzgerald of today that is able to play here now? And that legacy continues on, and that people get to grab a hold of it, and all people can experience, but it's rooted in that that context. And so, the Rossonian's kind of that crown jewel, if you will, of what we want the rest of 5 Points really to have, that vibe where, it's active, it's engaging, but it never leaves its historical context. And it's not just a plaster name, but it's really, you can feel the vibe. And I think that 5 Points was one of those neighborhoods in Denver that Black, brown, white, everyone would come. Everyone would come. And so just because it was curated by African Americans, everyone felt a part of it. And so I think it still needs to feel that same way today. And that's what we're looking to do.
That's great. Thank you so much for that answer. I have another question that kind of leads, you sort of touched on it, but how do you balance the need for modernizing and gentrifying the area without amplifying the negative aspects of gentrification? This is a question from Joe in the chat. Because, like you said, it's not just the Rossonian, it's all of Welton Street there. I mean, Welton Street is the heart of it, but 5 Points is a larger district, and I'm a gentrifier of 5 Points myself, and I'm never really sure how, I have reservations for tomorrow for a brunch place at a place called Mimosas on.
That's ours. That's one of
That's
our
yours?
places.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. The menu looks great.
Just for the record, you do know Joe is asking like a PhD level question, right? And I don't know how much time we have on this.
I know it's a huge question.
We all have points on it. I want Haroon to take it first, since he's the home field.
Yes, I would love you all to touch on your thoughts on this, because I think this is really the central question of this event: is how do you balance these needs here?
I'd like to really quick just jump in and ask if we could frame it from the point of view of when you're thinking about a new development. Like if you have an idea, or you have a development project coming across your desk, how does gentrification enter into your mind as you're thinking about the whole process for? And Antoine can jump in on the architecture even. It's like this is kind of the central question here. So I'd like to frame it in that sense, because that's how I'm going to be thinking about it, I think.
Got you. I think from my standpoint is this, is there has to be a long-term investment, right? If there is a short-term investment, it's always going to be about your performer. If it's a long-term investment, then it could be about the community. And so we're long-term investors. I live in 5 Points. My partner lives in 5 Points, and our capital understands that this is a long-term play. And the long-term play is how do we not only get a project stood up, but how do we also engage the community? Because gentrification, by largely that most of, folks are against is the gaps, right? A neighborhood that now has infrastructure, has new things that are happening, and the people that live there or historically live there no longer get access to that. And so one of the things that we want to do is close those gaps, and close those gaps are economically. So how do we close the gaps of the businesses that are here now? That the businesses that are here, that some of the properties that we own, how do we begin to say, well, as things are being built, how does it complement your business rather than compete with your business? As things are coming online, how do we continue to fortify you as a part and a premier piece of the community and the story, rather than someone that's, your rent was at $20, $22 a square foot, and we're raising you to 35. How do we close the gap for you so that you could participate, that when people do come into the neighborhood, that you're here to be able to access those opportunities rather than you being replaced or displaced? And I know there's a larger point, but my short is, how do we close the gaps economically for folks that live in the neighborhood, for businesses that live in the neighborhood, and as well as that projects don't displace folks, but it becomes an enhancement to the businesses that are there.
I agree with everything Haroon said. The only things I would add, it's a bit of a cliche, but as a development community, you can, do well while you're doing good, right? And so, I've done development. You didn't make a ton of money. You got some investors you got to respond to. They're cranky and they just want you to make some money. And so you are responsible to deliver a quality product. But one of the things I try to encourage, ultimately, as Haroon identified, if you allow and encourage the participation of that particular community from a design standpoint, that's something we always do. Like, we know the challenge of putting in a new X in a community is always going to change the dynamic of that community. And so we actively go into that community a month or two even before we put, I would say pen and paper come old, but before we would get on Revit, start drawing, right? We actively get involved in the community, and from a charrette standpoint, as well as from just a listening standpoint, right? We have a client that's thinking about doing something like this. What do you feel about that? What would you like to see? And so we actively encourage and establish that rapport between the client and with the community it's serving. Then additionally, one thing I try to break down, it's like not rocket science. Most of the communities that are being gentrified, they want the same stuff that's happening after it gets gentrified, but no one ever gave a damn when it was just them there. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I want nice streets, and I want, a sewer system that works, and I want streetlights, and I want sidewalks. It's all of these kinds of things that for whatever reason, just were neglected or not delivered. And now that new buildings are coming in, or new commercial activity, or new populations, then all of a sudden the city, has the wherewithal to deliver those things. That's usually where the disconnect and the trauma, if you will, comes into place. And so I think that, developer A has to acknowledge that, right? Then additionally, and this is something that many of you on this capacity can help influence in various ways. I serve on the planning commission here in Houston. It's actually going on right now. And I'm not rushing because it's variances right now and I just don't feel like dealing with it. But anyway, one of the things that we encourage is that for all, this is something that happened the last several years. Many of our new developers, if you're going to develop, building A in this neighborhood, then you must replace a 3-inch caliper tree with a 6-inch caliper tree. Like that's, you're going to put those trees in there. You're going to do a 6-foot sidewalk, not a 4-foot sidewalk. So like, mom and dad or little man and his brother can walk side by side, right? Crazy idea. We encourage, safe inclusion of bike lanes where we're going to put it there. We're not going to just slap paint on there. Like there has to be some level of bollards or protections for those kinds of things. Like these are things that we require you to put in to have a much more safe environment, but also one that can be productive for all the communities. And one of the things I actively involved in is trying to ensure that those residents are intimately aware of any kind of variance request or new development in their community. Oftentimes, a new developer comes in, they may or may not even tell the community that they're going to do something there. And so one of the things we've been pushing for is they have to have advance notice. And so now community A doesn't just have something pop up in their backyard, but they have notice of what's going on. And so those are some things that you can do on the front end. Joe, I'll put my information in the chat later on, because we can talk for hours. You'll buy the first 2 rounds and we'll go from there.
Yeah, that sounds good. PhD level question for sure. I would say so. It's a can of worms.
Yes, that's great. Thank you guys for your responses there. That's really, really what we want to be talking about here. Kind of coming off of that, are there any examples of current or recent projects that all 3 of you have seen that emphasize equity that have inspired you? Anybody want to take that first? There you go. Thanks, Haroon.
Sure. There's been a number of projects. There was I love what Urban Land Conservancy did in Holly Square on 33rd and Holly here in Denver. It was a community that was, that has had a lot of challenges. There was a lot of violence, and what they did is they came in and in a place where we've seen a lot of, non-maintenance happening. They became a steward of the community and said, hey, listen, we're going to buy this land, and we're going to make sure that this land is not going to just transition, but it's going to have a specific use for the community. And so, that land that was from a burned down retail center became the Boys and Girls Club. It became also a couple of other centers, the African American Health Center that is there now, and other centers that are there now. And before it happened there, it was an interim use development project. So my organization that I oversee, a nonprofit, was able to put some futsal courts, some basketball courts, and just to have some activity that the community would engage in first before things were changing, so that people felt that this was a part of them and not done without them. And so I was really pleased to see what Urban Land Conservancy did in Park Hill. And it's a little bit what we're looking to do here in 5 Points. I mean, we bought the 5 Points Plaza. And so instead of doing a scrape and much of that block, we own 80% of that block and the subsequent blocks, we've just been really reusing the building and keeping rents at a rate that has been attractive to new tenants that historically would not been able to be there. And one of the businesses was a Welton Street Cafe that has been in that neighborhood for over 30 years, and they did not have a long-term lease. And so for us to be able to buy it, we were able to give them some security that they weren't going to be moved if somebody new purchased it. So those are some of the things that I've seen. I think that it was intention. It had to be intentionality. It wasn't just by happenstance. And I think that any project that's going to have social and community impact has to go in there with the intention. And I think, the development, design, community are very creative. We're all creative. And so we have to be creative also in how we impact our communities.
Yeah, I can jump in quickly too. We've got a couple of projects, and I'll put on our commercial hat on at this point. We did something called a Rainbow Center for Health and Wellness, or something to that effect, in Cincinnati, Ohio. We were a design lead, and fortunately, from a sustainability standpoint, we were able to be LEED Platinum. We were the first LEED Platinum healthcare facility in the state of Ohio. So we're really excited about that. But more importantly, it was in a kind of a challenging part of Cincinnati. And the result of this particular building being completed, it just got finished maybe a year or two ago, was that the residents said this was the first healthcare facility they felt respected when they went, right? And it's just a clinic. It's a healthcare clinic. But one of the things we were very intentional to do from a design standpoint was, again, like I noted earlier, was to engage the residents and engage the community about what it should look like, where it can be, but also delivering them a top tier design entity, right? And what does that mean? It's not a big cinder block square building, right? It was, we've got sunlight, we've got colors, we've got an outdoor patio, we've got many of the things that you typically wouldn't see in a community of color. We were able to deliver that with a great partner that saw the vision. And then also, another thing that we did, and this is actually here in Houston, we did a library for Texas Southern University. TSU is an HBCU. It's the second largest one in the country. So it's probably like 10, 12,000 students on campus. And we put a library in there, and 21st century library is not just a stack of books, right? It's you have to have Wi-Fi, you have to have meeting spaces, you have to have a variety of things. Well, we have a facility that literally just opened right before the pandemic, but it was designed to be a library for the school and for the community. As many, you guys all in school right now, oftentimes our colleges can kind of be these little walled off enclaves in a community, and they don't always are receptive to people coming in from the outside. On the other hand, ours was designed to encourage people to come in from all over. We have a partnership with the city of Houston's library system, right? So there's a kind of a collaborative shared lending system as well. Neighborhood groups can rent spaces to hold like your PTA meeting or what have you in there. There's an African art gallery in there. And then, and this is the thing I'm actually really proud of, we convinced the board of trustees there to put in what we call photochromic glass on all the facades. And so we literally can program the opacity of the glass, kind of like transition lenses. And so, it was a great sustainability feature for the building, but, the community was really psyched to have this literally leading edge technology right within the middle of an African-American neighborhood, right? But cheek by jowl, across the street from this library is the oldest housing authority complex in the city of Houston, right? So it's really something that's directly within the community, but still is allowed to be a comfortable partner with the community, as opposed to something that's closed off from all the residents.
Fantastic.
You want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll just say 2 projects, not industrial, not our projects, but not too far from where I live, is the Steam on the Platte. We talked about reuse, and that's a property that's been put into service that it's in an area that helps to bridge what's south of the stadium in Denver with the Baker Golden Triangle area. And then the Meow Wolf building there too is going to be a super cool project when it's done. And again, it's just a way to culturally bridge neighborhoods that are physically constrained by the river running through it, right? So those are 2 projects that are kind of near and dear to my heart. Again, Black Creek has no involvement, but pretty sweet stuff anyway.
Thanks so much. I know at the CU Real Estate Symposium last year, a lot of the efforts that were used to help revitalize that community were highlighted, and talking about Meow Wolf as some of the anchors. So it's really interesting, and will be for us who are in Denver to see that progress. Antoine, I had another question, sort of following up on what you said earlier. A lot of the design elements that you mentioned are central to, your firm, like walkability and retail communities, are central pillars of new urbanism. So I know this audience is a lot of land use nerds. So can you talk a little bit about the opportunity for architects and designers to help drive equity through design and form-based planning over function?
I certainly can. I'm only chuckling because, a lot of these things, I would argue new urbanism, when it was first designed, didn't think about equity, right? They kind of were like, let's make something that looks nice and academic and will be great. And I think a lot of our programming has evolved, which I think is a good thing. But as I've talked about it very initially, and this is a great segue, equity doesn't have to be rocket science, right? When I was in school, I met people that were getting their PhD in nuclear engineering. They're really smart. Like, this isn't that smart. You don't have to be that deep to figure this out. Equity is essentially defining and allowing for, everyone to have a shot, right? And you have to understand that more people need more for their particular shot. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. There's been this slide that's been wandering around during presentations for the last couple of years about, equality versus equity, right? And equality gives everybody a ladder, right? But, if my heel is bigger than your heel, then us having a ladder doesn't mean a damn thing, right? So it's like we need to have different size ladders, right? In that whole thing. And so what I would like to see from, new urbanism is to go backward a bit and to really understand, some of the challenges that led to our urban places being the way they are. The presentation I did, of about 6.5 minutes about redlining and those covenants is part of an hour-long conversation. And I think that when you recognize that in the context of how our cities and our areas around our cities formed, then you have a greater appreciation of how to then change them. You can have a better appreciation of, I'll give you a perfect example. And this isn't new urbanist specifically, but it talks about, just gaps and ideas. We were talking to Houston is home of the Texas Medical Center, which is billed as the greatest and largest healthcare concentration in the entire world. And so there's, 110,000 people work in this concentrated healthcare area. And one of the huge healthcare systems there, we were talking to about doing a new hospital for them. This is in the midst of COVID. We're talking about how do we revisit our design of our spaces. We're thinking about, we have to concentrate on patient care and on clinical care and our exam rooms. And we're thinking about, diminishing our waiting area or maybe even eliminating it. So people are doing telehealth and those kinds of things. Well, then I asked the question, I was like, well, then, what happens if someone arrives at the hospital by bus? Like, what do they wait? They wait outside, right? Or, if you're making the waiting room smaller, do they lap it up? Like, how does that work, right? And then, our bus system here in Houston is not like maybe Denver or some other places. So the bus might come every 20, 30 minutes. And we have, thunderstorms, right? So you've got, Mr. Johnson waiting outside with his kid and it's pouring down raining because we have this small little waiting room, right? What happens if, he doesn't have the Samsung 21. And so, he might have some other phone and the telehealth doesn't work quite the same way. Those are things that you have to think about. And I think we have to, when you're thinking about, and that's why I said the Jedi, right? So for a number of years, and I'm older than most of you on the screen, it was diversity and inclusion, right? And so we want to hear from the Black and brown people, we're going to invite them in to have a seat. And the reason why we've kind of pivoted now to what's now being studied as Jedi is that you have to acknowledge that there are some gaps, like Haroon had talked about, and actually, and Nick had really brought up as well. You have to acknowledge those gaps exist, and then you have to kind of right some of those gaps. Because if you don't, then the diversity and inclusion is almost, it's performative at that point, right? If you have them at the table, but you haven't acknowledged where the gaps are and why they're important, and then begin to talk about how to change them, then, you'll be able to really right some of those wrongs. And so when it comes to new urbanism, you want to do new urbanism, well, then acknowledge that urban renewal was a crock, right? Acknowledge that urban renewal as a concept was an absolute project, abject failure, and then we can begin to have a real discussion about what new urbanism can and should be. Oh, don't get me started on national highway system, Harrison. Don't get me.
That's great. Thank you so much. So Antoine, I wanted to let you told me that you had some questions for Nick that you wanted to ask. So I wanted to give you some space to ask those.
I'm not going to put Nick on the hot seat. It was actually a pretty simple question. We talked about it, and I think it's Nick and Haroon can have an appreciation to even jump in. You talked about certifications and how valuable sustainability can be, both from a fiscal standpoint, as well as just, providing a better building, right? Or a better facility. But on the design side, it may not be a surprise to either one of you how much pushback we get in the certification process. It's actually rather comical. So our firm, we always sustainability is part of our design ethos. So it's not like we design and then, call in sustainability guy, hey guy, I need to make this lead, right? I mean, it's part of it's baked into our design conversation. We usually begin at lead silver and then try to work up. But what's fascinating, and we're finding with some of our clients, is that, we don't want to get certified, or it's a pain, or I don't know. And so I'd be curious to hear from the development side for each of you, what your response is to that, or how you guys address that, because it drives designers batty. I waste too much time trying to convince people.
Yeah, I can tell you from my experience, we quantify it financially as far as the cost, and then the capital, it's not my money necessarily, right? Like I'm responsible for managing this money, but I'll just go to our capital partners and say, look, the building is going to cost whatever, $85 a foot to deliver the shell. We can get to LEED Gold with another $7 a foot. We don't necessarily bake in incremental NOI, or I talked about the liquidity on the back end. I mean, I'm not adding that into the pro forma, but it's a way to show our capital partners, look, you tell me you want LEED buildings, we will deliver you LEED buildings. This is the cost. And we're finding more and more that they're like, great, go for it. So once we have the green light at that point, that's obviously super early when we're still pursuing the land site before we've even gotten into CDs and whatnot. Then we can really work with our architects and civil and design to make sure we get to those points. So I guess my comment would be, it's the earlier the conversations had, the better, and ensuring that your investors and your managers are of the same thinking going into a project. Prevents a lot of the headaches of when someone has a change of heart midway through design, or God forbid, a change order midway through construction. So we've just found that the earlier we have those conversations, the more successful they become.
Thank you guys for really discussing sort of how the rubber meets the road. And, I think that capital is driving the conversation, and we're hoping that now they're coming around to realize that, every stakeholder in a deal, not just the original investors, and that means community, the architects and sourcing pipelines, and all of that is part of that message. And I think, it's one positive to come out of some of the discussions around Business Roundtable. So I know we're getting close to the end of our discussion, and we want to give each of you a chance to maybe say one specific program or effort that you personally plan to champion to drive future equity. That's how they say you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So what's your personal sort of effort that you're going to take on? And then we'd love to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for your time.
I'll start here. Just knowing that I was a student relatively recently and talking to a lot of folks who are about to enter the professional commercial real estate trajectory. I think that a lot of the things we've talked about today, and looping in a lot of the environmental aspects as well, that is going to become a career opportunity. It's small now, right? So just set your expectations. If anyone has the intention of trying to market themselves in a sustainability role, there's not thousands of opportunities available today, but take comfort in the fact that from the trends we're seeing from capital, from the trends we're seeing in the market, it absolutely is going to become more and more critical. So position yourself strategically, but it's going to be a career opportunity over the next couple of decades for sure.
I guess we'll work backwards. Thank you guys for the opportunity. I can agree with Lily with saying you can, it's a big problem that we have to take one bite at a time, because it's a big elephant. But I've often told people, I take big bites and I chew my mouth open. So, there's a lot that we can do really, really fast, right? I think I'm gonna leave you with something, but also try to address Harrison's question, right? As far as, what to do we're dealing with a highway situation here in Houston, right? The Texas Department of Transportation is like the largest department by fiscal expenditures in the state of Texas. And, we are the champions of the highway. Add another lane, you got traffic, add some more. Now, mind you, all, directives show that that model does not make any sense, but we keep doing that. And there's a community here that fought against the expansion of one of our highways that was supposed to go in, because that expansion was literally going to lead to the erasure of 1,000 homes, in addition to 2 churches, a school, the whole shebang. And what I'm leaving you guys with is that fight went back and forth, and TxDOT was going on with what they were going to do. And however, what it led to now, and this got announced maybe 2 weeks ago, was that our county judge sued the TxDOT and our sitting another director. They sued it on a violation of EPA, as well as a violation of civil rights violation. And at the federal level, they actually finally got this measure stopped. And it's a groundbreaking opportunity because, as everyone on this thing knows, highways just motor through neighborhoods and have been doing it for 70 years. So for something to literally stop the Texas Department of Transportation is nearly unheard of. And so one of the things that I want to encourage everyone here on this call to do is to find your lane. That's kind of what Nick was talking about. You guys are going to have the education and training to be a part of this at a variety of levels, both from the development side, the fiscal analysis side. Some of you will do design, some of you will do capital assembly. There are a number of ways you can do, but also even just from the legislative and policy side. And so I think there's a number of avenues that you can take to really positively shape equity and shape justice. And for lack of a better term, and for another session, not have to have the scary DEI put on it, right? Because for better or for worse, even in 2021, people still get nervous when they hear diversity and inclusion. So we'll find a way to make it work.
I think just as I heard and I agree, especially with the words and the sentiments that have been said earlier. I think a couple of initiatives that we are undergirding now is of course, why we see gaps is one of the primary reasons is access, and so what we want to do is provide access, and access is from an educational standpoint, but then also the hands-on standpoint. I mean, how I became into development wasn't, if I just waited for the opportunity, would never have gotten there. And so I was given opportunity from civil technology to be able to get into this pathway. And so we've created initiatives where it's not just a internship, but it's also a pathway into our company specifically. And so we want to continue to champion that and be an example for that. And then secondly is some of the gaps that we see in the community that from the businesses and legacy businesses. We are looking to champion a incubation space where businesses can get the technical sustainability support, back-end support, so that as we're going through our projects, we're supporting them through that. And so we think it is a effort that is necessary and needed, especially in a commercial corridor that wants to retain its cultural heritage. And so for us, we deem it our responsibility, even though, sometimes as a developer, you say, well, that's not really my business. It is our business that we're helping the businesses along the corridor, that we're, even though they may be not associated, but they are one of our neighbors. And so what we want to do is create and stand up an incubation center as well as a accelerator so that they are able to get access, because sometimes, they're busy doing their business, their head is down, and they're making it day to day, and they don't have the time to go outside and figure these things out. And so we want to bring it closer to home. And the third thing is we just want to be an example. Some folks say, hey, it can't be done. We want to show it can be done. So we want, whatever, bites that we need to take to be able to show it. I think that's what we can do here, especially in Denver, and that people can see that it can be done with the capital structure and it still makes business sense. So those are the three things that we want to take on as initiatives and that we're undergirding right now.
Great, thank you guys so much. So that is all the time that we have for today. And I just want to take a moment and thank everyone who has supported Lily and I in leading the GREA and for supporting our class of 2021 cohort, who has really gone through this pretty wild and unexpected year. So Lily and I are really proud to have helped foster collaboration and hopefully innovation, especially given the current political climate and pressures from the investment landscape to standardize and meaningfully change DEI and social initiatives. And this three-part series is really one of the most important and impactful contributions of my time, our time at the CU MBA program. And I really hope that it has made a difference in the way that all of the participants from all three parts will work in the future in the commercial real estate space. So thank you, everyone.
And in conclusion, I echo all of Mallory's sentiments. I want to thank the support of the CU Real Estate Board, particularly Mike, Katie, Lisa, and Angela, and the greater CU Leads community. When Mallory and I reflect on our time at CU, it's abundantly clear that the network and the programming that the CU Real Estate Center and that all of your networks have helped us to provide has been one of the most impactful, as Mallory said, particularly during this time. So thank you for our unparalleled network and for everyone to push the conversation around the dreaded DEI, as Antoine said. And so, you know, it's something I plan to remain actively passionate about in my career. I know Mallory feels the same way as we move on to be leaders in the industry around. So please keep in touch, particularly as young women. We love to find and just hear the conversation. So thank you all. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you guys.
Everybody
Really
else.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, thanks.
Big
Everybody
shout
have
out to Preston Garland. Big shout.
Yes.
Thank you all.
All right, thanks, everybody.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you guys.
Preston.
Yes, none of this would happen without Preston.
There you go. All right, take care. I got to go to commission now. Argue about
Awesome.
variances. All
Thank you
right,
so much.
bye.
I sent, or I tried to connect both Haroon and Antoine via LinkedIn.
Great.
Good.
Great.